Here we go. Welcome back to Friends in Austin. Today I've got Dave and Garret on the podcast, and they had a company where they had this technology for cooling data centers, big data centers for like Microsoft, Google, etc. Hold on, my levels are too high. I got to turn this down. All right, sorry about that. So they had this technology that would cool these data centers, and then they were in talks with some companies like Microsoft, Google, correct?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to get into today because it's a really interesting story. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit last weekend, July 4th. You know, I've got a lot of friends that live at SoCo on the Lake. It's a really cool apartment complex here in Austin. I haven't lived at every apartment complex in Austin, but I got to think it's one of the best to live in. I mean, y'all have been there.
Hands down.
Because of the people, not because of the quality. It's not like, oh, it's super nice. It's just the people, the community there is amazing.
Yeah, apartment complexes are always trying to be like, this is a community. But that's the first apartment complex I've been to where it's literally a community. Everybody there knows each other and they all hang out together.
And everyone looks out for one another. It's
for
great.
sure. And we also, like, I have friends there that are 20, 30 years older than me. You know, and they're like actually my friends, you know, so I like the wide variety in people and age range. But anyway, so I don't live there anymore because I live here, but I go there to hang out and the pool's open again. I was there for July 4th. And basically like a fight broke out. This guy really straight up assaulted us, and we were trying to stop the fight. We're not the kind of guys that are like, oh, we're not fighting people. We don't want to get in brawls. Like
right.
we're good, chill people. So we're out on the dock and people are shooting off fireworks on the other side of the lake. We went to go look. So we went out on the dock. The dock goes and it's right on Lady Bird Lake, like South Austin.
Yeah. Opposite side of the city.
Opposite side of the city. So we're looking at the fireworks, and then a nice group of, kids in their 20s, or people in their 20s, not kids, but people in their 20s. I'm not that much older than 20, so they're not kids. They come down and they seem like a real friendly group. They're nice people. I could tell, you know, they're shooting off their own fireworks, and it turns into this little hangout. There's probably about 8-10 people on the dock. And at some point, someone is screaming really loud from what we thought was the trail on the other side of the lake. And, you know, we thought he was joking because it sounded so crazy. Like, I couldn't really make out what he was saying, but it sounded kind of like just rooting on the 4th of July type thing is what I had in my head.
Yeah, just like hooting and hollering.
Just hooting and hollering.
Yeah.
And I think we all thought he was just hooting and hollering. So we start hooting and hollering back. Like, yeah, we're all having a great time.
Yeah.
This is cool. Fuck yeah, 4th of July, man.
4th of July, you've all been drinking for a while.
Yeah. So he eventually... he's paddling over on a stand-up paddleboard. We realize he's actually on a stand-up paddleboard and he's heading our way, and the screaming is continuing. And now I'm like, no, this is starting to sound rather violent.
Yeah. So you knew before he came over that it was starting to get kind of weird. This is like, what's going on?
KP was like, hey, like, I think I see that guy's on a paddleboard and he's heading over here, and he's still screaming. So at that point we thought like, oh, this could be a little trouble. And like one of the girls on the dock was like, I think that guy's coming over here. I'm getting out of here. So like 3 or 4 people left because they were scared. And I was like, don't worry about it. We'll take care of this guy. He comes over and he's saying either fight me or get me a beer and all this stuff. And at first I was like, maybe we should give him a beer because it'll calm the situation. But once he got a little closer, I was like, no, I don't want him entering our area. Like, don't come over in our area. So I stood up and I was like, don't come over here, man. Don't come over here. Just leave. And KP told him, he's like, dude, no one was yelling at you. Like, we thought we were joking around. No one wants to fight you.
Yeah, chill out.
And he's like, you fucking fight me, pussies, and saying stuff like that.
Being a drunken idiot.
Being really crazy.
Wait, and so there's one of him, obviously.
One of him.
How many of you?
There's like at least 5 dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what's this guy thinking?
What is he thinking? Exactly. So we're trying to convince him to just go away. And he won't go away. And he's coming up talking shit, like saying who was talking shit. And then he tries to get up on the dock, and he does. And KP, our friend, who's, most people don't know him, but he's a really nice guy. He's not the kind of guy.
Yeah, one of the kindest people I know.
Yeah. And he's
real
not
chill.
He's not confrontational, and he was just being reasonable and saying, not even in an angry tone. It's like, hey, no one was trying to fight you. Like, just, leave us alone. And there's 2 other guys standing up that look like more of a threat. But he decides to hit KP in the face twice when KP's sitting down, like looking kind of sideways. Yeah. It's like, why are you hitting the guy that is not even standing up?
Not even addressing you.
Yeah. He's just telling you. So he hits him twice. So KP gets up and he shoves him off the dock, and the dude lands in the water. And
which is the appropriate action.
Yeah,
It
Because
is.
then
100%.
it completely like dissolves the situation. Like now you're in the water. How do you feel about that?
and don't come back up here.
Yeah.
Don't come back up
Just
here.
give it up, man.
Yeah. So we tell him, don't come back up here. And he tries to get back up. I put my foot on his face and I shove him back in the water with my foot. He
And
tries
at that
to,
point, he should feel defeated.
Yeah.
Like, he should probably give this up, dude. Move on.
Not
Give
to
it up.
mention, it hasn't his paddleboard floated like
his
hundreds of feet down the
his-
river.
It's the water was pretty calm, but it was probably 10, 15 feet away. His paddle's over here, his paddleboard's over there. He's flopping around like a fish, trying to slide his way back up on the dock. So there's like, after we got him back off, like there's more of the trying to convince him to go away. I go sit down. These other guys are talking to him. He's kind of swims over to the other side. He tries to climb up over there on their side. And I'm just like, I'm just going to watch and see what happens. Like, I'm not worried about this guy hurting them because there's more of them. Like, someone could get hurt, but I'm just going to hope that they can ease the situation. I don't need to be that involved. And they basically start fighting. He gets back up on the dock and he starts fighting this other guy that I met that day. This guy was also a really nice guy. And I think that, you know, people's adrenaline just got high. And I mean, there was yelling for 10 minutes. We're yelling and back trying to get this guy to go away, you know? So people are starting to get amped up. They start fighting. At one point, they both hit each other and they both knocked each other down. They both, boom, hit the dock, dude.
Shit.
Yeah. And so they're continuing to fight. And like, I used to do MMA and stuff. I did wrestling and jiu-jitsu for a long time, but like, I don't want to fight people. I don't like fighting people. I don't want to hurt anyone. And also, like, I know I could get hurt too, but it's a matter of like, it making sure people are safe too. And I feel like the people who know how to fight, they don't want to fight people because they don't have anything to prove. It's just stupid. It's a waste of time. Either you're going to get hurt or they're going to get hurt. So you might get sued. You might get arrested. So
There's nobody wins anything here. There's not a prize at the end of this.
we just want this guy to go away. Never in my
Yeah.
life have I tried so hard to not fight and stop a fight.
Right.
Like,
Put so much effort into not fighting.
yeah.
and still ended up having to kind of fight.
Yeah,
a little
having to
bit.
kind of fight. So the guy that was assaulting came and he was on top of the other guy and like he wasn't really hurting him, but like the guy was trying to hit him from the top. The guy was trying to hit him from the bottom. So I just went over and I got him in a guillotine choke to just pull him off because I knew that like if I pulled his head like that, like he has no choice but to go where I make him go.
Yeah.
And you just get their throat like right before your wrist on your forearm and you pull back with your shoulders, not your arms. And I didn't do it as tight as I could because I knew it would have made him pass out.
Yeah.
But I did it tight enough and I was like letting him up a little bit so he could still breathe.
And this should give him the moment of like, maybe I should submit at this point. Maybe
Yeah.
I should give up.
So I pulled him over to the other side of the dock and I kind of tossed him down. And then the other guy that was fighting him was still really upset. So he came over like wanting to stomp on him and stuff. And I was like, no, dude.
That's
Like,
kind of a natural reaction
Yeah.
too. It's like this guy just hit me in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're not turning this into a beat down. Like
Yeah.
and I was just like, that's enough. That's enough. Like, did somebody call the cops? Because that's the only way at this point.
That's
that
the
we
only way
can-
this is going to end.
Yeah.
Is there a better way of getting rid of him? There's not.
Yeah.
We've done everything else.
And then I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, all right, do I need to subdue him until the cops get here? Because I really am literally afraid of him paddling off and drowning in Town Lake. Like, as much as I hate this guy right now, like
Right.
I don't want him to wind up floating in Town Lake drowning. Someone confirmed that like, yes, we did call the cops. They're on the way. And I'm like, all right, good. Like, he's not fighting anyone right now. He's like, all right, I'll leave. Like, where's my phone? And I'm like, dude, it's probably in the bottom
It's probably
of the lake.
in the lake. Yeah.
It's not our
I mean,
problem.
The odds are high. It's in the lake.
Just get the fuck out of here.
Just move on. Yeah, cut your losses, dude. Get a new phone.
Yeah,
You're
so
done.
I told KP, I was like, all right, dude, like, let's go. I don't want to be involved in filing a police report. Like, I'm not scared of that. I didn't do anything wrong, like, you know, but I want to be out of here. And so we went to his apartment. We went up. We're sitting on the balcony. It's on the trail that overlooks Town Lake. And what do you know? We see these two cops walking up with masks on. And they look it up at us, and they're like, hey, have you guys heard about anyone fighting over here? And we're like, yeah, we heard some ruckus
we heard
at the dock.
something. Yeah. might have
that
saw something.
general area,
Yeah,
maybe.
might go that way.
So they start walking towards the dock, and they can't get in because it's locked. And then they start to like pass it, and I'm like, no, hey, it's like it's right there. And I yelled out what the code was, and then they're like, oh, sweet, thanks. They punched it in. They got in. They went down, but apparently at that point, the other guy that was involved in the fight had convinced the guy to go away, which I was a little afraid of that. That's what I was
Yeah.
saying. I was like, should I stay here? But also, is it legal for me to hold a person down until the police arrive? It's like, is that me doing something to that? Like, he's free to leave if he wants to leave. I I don't want him to.
I don't want him here, but I also don't want him to fight anyone here.
And I don't want him to drown in Town Lake.
Yeah.
So
they're all not good choices.
yeah. So anyway, he had paddled off, and my hope is that he's fine. I mean, if he was able to fight and stuff like that, he must have been worn out, and he was obviously messed up. But I'm just hopefully he found his way to land. And
yeah, so the cops didn't get him.
They didn't get him.
He had left.
They didn't get him, and I don't think they filed a report. I think they just said, "Hey, is this still an issue? No, it's not an issue anymore. All right, we're leaving. We probably got 1,000 more calls."
Yeah, right. How many disturbing the peace calls do they get at night?
Yeah.
You know?
Dude, I kind of hope this guy
Especially on 4th of
one
July.
day hears this podcast and it's like, "Oh my god, I suck so bad."
yeah, dude. I feel bad for him, but also it's crazy, dude. He's
Thanks
obviously
for the story, bro.
Yeah. What an insane thing too. I think the craziest part to me is where he punches KP in the face twice after just getting out of the water, and KP's not even looking at him.
Mhm,
why do you do that to someone? That makes no sense. He must have just been messed up.
He's obviously kind of a coward, like hitting the guys that are not standing up. You know, it's like he wanted to fight, but at the same time, he's a bit of a coward. I don't get it. Well, anyway,
what an insane story.
Yeah.
What just a crazy thing to happen.
It was a crazy July 4th. And before that, I was hanging out with y'all, and we were playing Sink the Biz at Derek's.
Oh, man. Yeah.
That's a cool game. So, like,
it is. It's fun.
You're from Indiana, right, Dave?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's funny. Like, I hang out with a lot of Indiana people in Austin who I met in Austin. Are you
It is
also
crazy.
from Indiana?
No, I'm from Lubbock.
Okay,
Here in
okay,
Texas,
that's right. Yeah. So, Sink the Biz is a game that I don't know if Nick's Bar in Bloomington invented it.
I'm pretty sure they did.
But so I knew about it in college, and so did our friend Derek, and maybe so did you.
Mm-hmm.
You get a bucket of beer and you put a cup in it, and you put beer in the bucket, and then you put the cup in the bucket, and you take turns pouring beer into it. You can pour as much or as little as you want, but the idea is to pour as much as you can to where the next person, when they pour it, sinks the biz, and then they have to pound it. So I got a great video of you. You had to pound like 4 in a row, dude.
So did Garret at one point.
Yeah, I bitched out earliest. Because like after the 4th chug of that, I was like,
well, not to mention
this game.
We just eaten a massive meal right before that.
Oh yeah, you brought Whataburger.
I brought
over.
Whataburger for everybody.
And so we downed this massive meal, and then we tried chugging a bunch of beer, and it didn't go that well.
When you explained the game to me, I thought, oh, this sounds like a fun game. But then it was Derek and you were so damn good at it, just getting it right to the tops. Like if anybody glances too hard at this cup, it's gonna sink.
Yeah. And so you have like a 5-second grace periods. Like if you pour, you have to wait 5 seconds, and if it sinks in that 5 seconds, it's yours. But if it doesn't, it sinks before the other person. It's their problem.
Yeah.
And so it just so happened that like you had to pound like the first 4, and you were out, and then you were out. Then it was just me and Derek, and we were still pretty equal. But I was just like, all right, I do have to drive eventually.
Yeah,
so.
I do have to do things
calm down a bit.
So.
Yeah, if you're ever looking for a really quick way to get rid of 24 beers,
No joke.
Sink the
We rolled through a
Biz.
case quick.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into this company, man, because this is a really interesting story. So I'm not really sure where to start. I guess I'll let you start.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good. I guess probably the right place to start is back in college.
Mhm.
I was going through my mechanical engineering degree, and I started interning at a couple power plants. One that was way out in the middle of nowhere. That's like a combined cycle. I won't get too much into the math. People are gonna like snooze.
Yeah.
Right, Dave, you might have to keep me through this whole thing. Like, hey man, that's too sciencey. Let's pull that back a bit. So I was working at a power plant out in the middle of nowhere, and that first internship like blew my mind because you see power plants from the road and you think like, oh, there's a lot of pipe and stuff. Once you get in there, it's like this web of things going on. And one of my first jobs was just to take all the drawings they had and update them. So I had to follow every single line. What was cool about that is that it really helped me understand how the power plant works, all the interconnected systems that there were. And as I moved forward through my internship, I started working on a thermography program where we would use infrared cameras to do preventative maintenance. And it just so happened that
that means to find out where the heat is leaking out of the plant.
Yeah, so if you see like the front part of a pump is hot, you realize like, oh, the bearing over here is probably an issue. And just by looking at the heat of things, you can see potential issues as you move around.
Where your biggest efficiency losses are often your hottest places in your plant.
Yeah, and things that are wearing out, things that are tearing down get hot. And so I need to replace those in the next maintenance round.
Gotcha.
So I was taking pictures for that kind of thing, moving around the plant. And one of the pictures I took, I got the cooling towers in the background. And it just kind of struck me how much energy is just pouring out of these cooling towers. And for those who don't know, a cooling tower is basically, they pump water to hot things, heat the water up. The water comes back to the cooling tower. They spray it out over the top of it and run some big fans. And we kind of use that water, the evaporative effect, to cool down the water before it goes back and cools things down again. And as I got to looking at that, I thought, man, it's kind of insane. The idea here is that I'm trying to get rid of energy. But then if you look at that system, you see, oh, there's tons of pumps running. I've got 38 wells feeding this thing. We're using 3,000 gallons a minute of water just pouring in because all the water that you lose. Just this massive amount of energy.
Not to mention it's fresh water. It can't be salt water. It has to be clean and treated. And
this is like usable water in an area where they are running out of water. So when I started to read some of the survey things for the power plant as it was being built, and one of the first things the surveyors told them is that you're going to be out of water by the year 2022, and they're building this thing in like 99.
Mm-hmm.
So like, 23 years out, it's going to be fine. If you run out of water for the power plant, you're going to run out of water for the town, for all the oil and gas refineries that are around. Like, you're going to be out of water. No one seemed, I mean, you can't flush toilets. You're going to be out of water in this whole area. There aren't lakes or rivers to pull from.
Where is this?
Denver City, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a desert area. There's not a whole lot going on out there. So as I got to looking at that, I kept thinking, man, we're using tons of water and tons of energy for a system whose sole purpose is to get rid of heat, get rid of energy, but you're pumping energy into it. So it just kind of struck me at that point. I dove in and started like reading some.
And not to interrupt you real quick, but sorry to interrupt you real quick.
Quite specifically.
When you talk about the efficiency of a power plant and what is it? It's the 33%.
Oh yeah, so like a steam turbine runs about 33% efficient. So if I have 100 megawatts on a steam turbine, I have to get rid of 200 megawatts of low grade heat, which is a massive amount of energy. And this is the way most of these plants work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just efficiency loss. It shows you the amount of heat that is leaving is more than you're actually getting.
Yeah, because like heat is energy.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what a whole steam turbine works on. If you get the water hot enough, it turns into steam. Then it goes through the turbine. And on the back side of the turbine, you have to cool it down to maintain that pressure difference across the turbine.
Okay.
So we're taking 2/3 of the heat that we have just out to atmosphere.
Out, yeah.
And
wasted.
It's a bigger problem on a global scale. I'm going to get a little bit statisticky here, but the U.S. Geological Survey shows us that 45% of our freshwater withdrawals go to power plants. Not for drinking water, not for livestock, not for agriculture.
45%?
Yeah.
45%.
Wow.
And if I remember the numbers correctly, it's about 161 billion gallons a year. So to put that in perspective, if anybody's been to Niagara Falls, you can take Niagara Falls and multiply it by 3, and you almost have the rate at which we're pouring water into power plants.
Wow.
It's a massive amount. In the meantime, the UN predicts that by the year 2023, 2/3 of the world will be living in water scarce environments. Like, water is going to be the gold of the next age. So looking at that, I thought, we got to do something different. This is not a sustainable way to get rid of this heat.
Yeah, if we're using that much fresh water for power plants, we need to figure out a better way to cool them.
Yeah, because not to mention when that water evaporates out, providing its cooling properties, most of that water ends up falling back into the ocean and becoming salinated water now.
And then we're going to have an energy problem too. Like if you were to start running out of water, which we're using to cool these plants, which we need for the plants, and then we start running out of drinking water, it's like, well, then you have this issue between, do you want to drink water or do you want to have power?
Yeah. Yeah. And everyone thinks like, oh, we can just, we'll just use seawater. We'll desalinate it. But that's extremely energy intensive, and energy, remember, takes water. So it's just this huge problem that you kind of run into.
I've looked into that desalination. For people who don't know, it's removing salt from salt water and turning it into fresh water. And it may, in the long run, be the only viable way for us to continue having fresh water, correct? I mean, at some point, it's got to be.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But the problem right now, I looked this up years ago and my research wasn't very good, but what I found was like, it's just really expensive to do. So that's why we still use fresh water, because it's expensive to convert salt water in mass.
Right.
Yeah.
Because too, you're left over with massive amounts of byproduct that you have to somehow get rid of. And maybe you could use it for salting roads in winter, but eventually you're going to have enough in the silos that you just don't know what to do with it.
Just launch into space.
Toss it back into the ocean or something. Yeah.
Extra salty ocean.
It takes a lot of energy to do that. And so that's kind of the problem with desalination.
One more thing about desalination. If you're ever stranded on a desert island and all you got is salt water, if you can put the water in the sun and get something plastic over it to where it evaporates in droplets into the plastic and drips down the side into a container, that's how you can desalinate salt water on a small scale.
Yeah, just a little condensing on that plastic piece.
Yeah. And you got to catch all that condensation, evaporation, and that's your fresh water.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue.
So I guess I kind of noticed it that first internship. I was like, man, this is, wow, what a crazy problem. And two, how incredibly expensive. Because really that's what it comes down to for these companies is, will you save me money or not? Like the altruistic things are great. Like we want to save the planet and stuff, but money is what really
money
matters.
First. And if we can do both, great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so that was kind of my whole idea, was just to try to find a system that was more efficient, something that could run off the available heat that we were trying to get rid of, because then I don't have to pay for more energy to come in. And I went through, man, if I could go back and look at some of the drawings I did in the beginning, it was just, some of them were just ridiculous ideas, but I was just iterating constantly, trying to use like, Stirling engine cycles, Ericsson cycles. None of this is probably going to mean a whole lot to a lot of the listeners, but just different thermodynamic cycles, try to figure out how can I use this low grade heat to basically just accelerate the push of heat to the air.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried a whole bunch of things, and this is over. So like I finished that internship. I went to work at an internship for an HVAC company. I went back to that same power plant, went to another power plant after that. So I'd gotten around quite a bit through a few different thermodynamics internships. Like the HVAC thing is basically thermodynamics in the end too. And then, so I was just in my free time, I'm taking, 20 hours or 16 hours of school and working a 35-hour a week internship. And then when I had some time, I was back at the drawing board just trying to figure out how do I solve this problem. So once I graduated, I went to work at Kiewit Offshore Services in Corpus Christi, Texas. There's this massive construction site. They run billions of dollars worth of construction through there every year. And man, we worked 10, 12-hour days.
Yeah.
Is that where you guys met?
This is where Garret and I met.
Yeah. Okay. So I come in.
Is at Kiewit Offshore, which basically their strategy when you start working there is kick you in the butt out into the yard and say, figure it out.
Yeah, it's like a trial by fire. Like you graduate college, you pop in, they're like, okay, go build shit.
So I had been there 6 months prior to Garret getting there. And Garret, out of the luck of the draw, got assigned to our project. And so I basically noticed Garret was like smart and, what do you call it?
Good looking.
But more so like competent, I guess, which was a hot commodity at the time. So I grabbed him and took him under my wings and make sure that whatever he does, I'm going to be involved. So.
Yeah, I remember they put me on the project on a Friday. And so I got out, they put me out of the job trailer. I got my computer and got a desk in the job trailer, which is like, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile from the office. You have to walk every day.
Yeah, it was far.
So, I mean, I've been sitting here. I moved from Lubbock to this new place to do this job. And I've been in training for like 2 weeks. And they put me on a project on a Friday. And then it's the weekend. And I was like, I don't know a person in town. I don't have anything to do. So I just went to Dave. I was like, hey, are you going to be here tomorrow? He's like, you want to come in on your first weekend? Like, dear God, please, I need something to do. Holy Jesus. So Dave just kind of showed me the ropes of that whole place.
Because by the time he showed up, we were working 7 days a week.
Oh, yeah, dude, you guys had to be doing
14
like
hours a
week
day
or something.
Minimum.
Because they started loading up the job and kind of taking a few of those hours.
Well, what happened was the job was initially only supposed to be a small amount, like about $10 million. And then once we got all the stuff in, because it was a project that had gone bad with another contractor, by the time we saw it all, we were like, yeah, this is more like $100 million job, but they never gave us any extra staff.
And is this when you were constructing an oil rig?
It was it's called the Marine Weld Containment System.
Mm-hmm.
And it
was the response to the BP oil spill.
Yeah.
Oh.
So once the Mercando incident happened, the government basically told all of the oil companies in the Gulf, you can't do any new projects, no upstream projects, until you have a backup plan, some way to fix this if it happens again.
Yeah, it's like shut it down until we have fail-safe.
Yeah, because if you guys can remember what the problem was with that is that the well was so deep, they didn't know how to cap it when it blew.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what our project was.
Yeah, and it was such high pressure, too. None of the caps they were working on could get down there and be effective once it was down there.
Yeah, correct.
So these boats that we were working on, basically, if there was another problem like the BP oil spill, someone somewhere hits a big red button and says, fix it. These tanker ships would fly to Kiewit Offshore Services. They'd lift all these modules on top of them, get them all piped up and connected. then these 2 ships could go out there and produce the well for up to 6 months without a resupply so that they could drill a relief well.
Without a resupply of what?
So like, I mean that like there's methane buildups. There's all kinds of things you have to store on board so they don't have to come out and like empty them. They can hold up to 6 months of that stuff just there on site. And so it was a really complicated project. I mean, we might be diving too much into Kiewit here, but it was, no one had done this thing before. There was a, what they call a turret system off the side that has this big buoy with the huge umbilical that goes down to the seafloor, that just a system that no one's ever built before. So it was a huge, crazy project. And so Dave and I kind of met in this fiery, like, get it done as fast as possible, but don't mess it up kind of scenario.
Yeah. And do it for free and get it done by yesterday.
Get it done by yesterday.
Do it for free. Get it done yesterday.
That did turn out to about $112 million project or something in the end.
It was over 120 million when I left.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So we met at Kiewit, and that's like I was still pretty much doing like working 10, 12-hour a day at Kiewit, and then I'd go home at the end of the day and just I'd finally set up like a modeling system through Excel. I'd gotten the right kind of add-ins so that it could do like the thermodynamic properties of the fluids and things automatically for me so that I could iterate a lot faster. And just guessing at it, I bet you I did probably 2,000 different designs, just iterating different mediums, different piping connections, different ideas.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, and I asked you, it's like, how does that look? You're in a computer program doing this?
Yeah, so basically I'm using Excel, and I've got a lot of sheets that have like calculation sheets and things going on, but I built it such that I could basically look at one console, and I could change this, change that, change it over here, and see how that changed the full system. You're
doing a lot of different trial and error, and then it's giving you some mathematical output, and then this is good or this is bad.
Right. Yeah, playing with a lot of equipment efficiencies or different expansion properties.
Yeah, and I think the gases were the biggest change that I tried. Everything. I tried like butane, which is probably not something you want to like have just in a pipe, but helium, hydrogen, nitrogen. I tried water. I tried all kinds, everything I could think of that seemed like feasible. I would run it through a model and see what I could do. I'm trying to line up this point where it's efficient enough, just efficient enough, so that it will, what's the right way to explain this? Like basically you get a flywheel moving and then the system can kind of keep going. If anybody's ever seen a Stirling engine, or at least just Google Stirling engines, you'll see that like with enough temperature difference and you give it a little kickstart, then it will go and it will just use that temperature difference to run.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find this kind of sweet spot, basically the most efficient system I can find so that low grade energy can move through it without me having to run a motor to get it to move.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
You want it to run, you want to get it going and then it run itself on the energy that it's kind of producing?
Right. The energy that it's trying to get rid of, I want to use that energy to run the system.
Okay.
So ultimately what I came down to was using CO2, but specifically in a transcritical phase. So CO2, just about every gas has this supercritical state where it's as heavy, like as dense as a liquid, like water, but it moves as easily as air. So it's just this kind of medium that we'll never really get to understand very well because we can't touch it or feel it. These are high pressures, but not too terribly high temperatures. The great thing about it is that it moves easily, so it doesn't cost me a lot of energy to move it around the pipe, but it's also dense in its specific heat. So like its heat capacity, how much heat it can hold per gram is pretty high.
Which is why they use water, because water has a massive heat capacity to it, you know? So we're trying to find something that has a similar heat capacity to water, enough the ability to draw as much heat into it from a hot surface as possible and then move it away.
And you also had to maybe change some parts and components. It's not changing what's inside it, but maybe changing some components as well.
Oh yeah, some of the like actual equipment didn't exist. I mean, it exists, but not in a mass-produced way, right? Like you can get custom equipment built for these kinds of things,
which costs an insane amount of money.
Yeah.
One quote we got, I think, for one part of the system was $1 million on its own.
Yeah, and it was a tiny prototype. Like it was really scaled down.
Just to get a prototype?
Yeah.
Well, to get this turbine that we were trying to use, which eventually I moved away from turbo machinery, just because of how incredibly complex and expensive it is. But for a very small prototype, they were going to charge me, like I think it was 1.1 million for just one of like 7 major components.
Jeez.
It's like,
Yeah.
that's out. No way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then ultimately, this is skipping forward a little bit. We'll come back. We built a prototype that ran and operated for about $1 million total.
Mm-hmm.
So once we figured out all those components, we were able to get the price down.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say next?
I mean, so that's like diving pretty sciencey on it. But I guess really for most listeners, it's probably just like, it's kind of like your air conditioner, but it runs in a different direction.
Okay.
And on a massive scale.
Mm-hmm.
So we're focusing really hard on power.
I don't know how my AC works, so.
Yeah. Most people don't. Just
I realized that the
does.
other day because I was complaining. I was like, man, I can't believe they do this in AC systems. And then I realized my audience was like eyes glazed over. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, oh, man, I kind of just assumed. But no, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Dave and I met, was at Kiewit.
Okay.
And then David finished the project and you moved back to Houston because he
Yeah.
worked for a different district than I did.
Before that, I want to say we did start. He brought me on, or
Oh, yeah, we should tell
we went
that
out to
story.
dinner one night, and he's like, "Hey, I have this idea. I want to bring you on. I like what you do.
Yeah,
I
I
like
need
how
some
you
help.
work. I need help. I can't figure. I'm kind of stuck. So, come join us." So we start working together on this thing, and my role as just like the construction building guy. We used my garage at my apartment to build our first prototype ever off this tiny little Stirling engine.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how big is this thing? It's
The first one ever that we built was
Yeah,
fit on top
which
of a folding table.
in no way actually worked.
It was
it
awful.
was a
It was
terrible
more
end
of a
result,
funny
but it was-
story than anything.
Yeah, it could sit like right here on this table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to build it as small as possible.
and how big would this thing be in use?
It'd probably take about a third of a power plant's real estate,
Oh my God.
which is
yeah.
about what cooling towers do now.
So you're trying to build
possibly
this
even
tiny
more.
model of this large scale thing and
Yeah.
just prove it as a concept, and that's your prototype, because that's
And-
just, you don't have the real estate or the money to
Yeah,
build something of that.
exactly.
You start here, and then all right,
We're
now
funding it
yeah.
ourselves out of our meager paychecks with the
Yeah.
How
any
scary was
tiny-
that? How scary was that?
it was well, so what we did, this is before we had decided what medium to use, and
Yeah, I
we were
hadn't
just
gotten
trying
to
to
CO2
do
at this
proof
point
of
either.
concept. So we were trying to just heat up something so
Mhm.
we could cycle it through this piping system that we had made.
Mhm.
And it was
We ran like a hot oil loop.
it was whole, yeah. So
And-
we set it on hot
Oh.
oil. So we had this turkey burner set up with this pot of oil that we had drilled holes into, so we could pipe in and out of it. And it
we
ended
couldn't
up,
find a pump that would pump this oil at this temperature that was like a feasible price. Like I could have paid thousands for a pump, but we didn't
a
have it
hot
at that
oil
point.
pump. So we
Mhm.
bought a fryer pump where it's just a hand crank thing just to move the
So, like,
oil
where
around.
what they pump, like if you're making a bunch of French fries, you got oil you got to get rid of. That hot oil,
Yeah.
they make a little hand pump to get rid of that. So we just kind of put that thing in line.
When I worked in fast food, I just had to go out and dump the grease into dumpster.
In buckets.
Yeah.
I didn't have a crank.
This is fancy stuff. So anyway, we're trying to run this thing. We've got an open flame with oil circulating through, and not to mention we're not really expert pipe fitters by any means.
Yeah.
So this thing is leaking like a sieve, and Garret is in there trying to run the system.
So Dave had been-
flinging hot oil.
He
all
was
over
at
the
work,
place.
and I was like itching because we'd finally finished it. I was like, I really want to turn this thing on, and I can't wait anymore. And Dave's like, dude, I have to finish this before I can leave work, so wait for me. And I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, click, and got it all moving.
Yeah.
Oh,
Turned
yeah,
it on,
wait,
like,
man.
all right, whatever, bye. So, and then it's kind of a really stupid thing looking back at it, but as I started getting the system up to temperature and things are starting to get where I want them, I'm like, oh yeah, cool, this is happening. I got this thing moving, and I'm sitting here cranking this with my left hand. I'm like adjusting the turkey burner with this hand. Well, the bulkhead fittings on the turkey burner pot started to leak a little bit of oil out of them.
Because notice that when we filled it up with oil, it didn't leak at all. But as oil gets hotter, it gets
It's
much more
less
viscous.
viscous,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it starts leaking through, and at some point that caught on fire.
At some point, that caught on
But
fire.
I was cool with that for a minute. I was like, this is a manageable flame. I can handle this. So I'm running the hot oil pump with my left hand, and one of the seals went out on the crankshaft of that pump, and it starts leaking out like 400-degree oil down this handle. And I'm like, this is fine. It's going to be all right. It's cool. And then the flames got bigger, and then finally I was like, okay, I have to quit this shit. So I turned it all off, sprayed it with a fire extinguisher. I almost burnt the whole garage down.
You pulled, basically pulled it,
Oh, garage.
pulled it out of the garage on fire, and I'm pulling up at this point,
Mhm.
coming home from work, like rushing home from work so we can turn this thing on, and I see Garrett just smoldering in the garage.
I think that was the point at which I started throwing the whole prototype into the street.
In the dumpster.
Like, I was so angry. And we fished some of it back out.
Yeah.
So you took hours and hours and you just got mad and started trashing
Basically
it.
trashing 10
Done
minutes.
with this. They really should not have let us do that shit there. No, that was pretty dangerous.
I don't think they would have if we would have asked, but it was more of like a forgiveness situation and not a permission situation.
That's the best way to approach most things.
Yeah.
I would have been a little concerned if I was your neighbor and I knew that you were running this project or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love the creativity. Like you have this mass thing. You obviously both know some principles of, whatever, math, science, thermodynamics. You're like, let's just buy whatever we can afford. Like the concept is the same. Let's just use any tools we have to try to prove the concept. And then after we prove the concept, scale up. I love that. It's brilliant. It's so like ingenuity,
Yeah. And it's kind of what we had to do in order to like get anybody on board with us. When you start talking about thermodynamics with a money guy, he's like, stop.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
quit
no
talking.
idea.
Like, I have no idea what you're saying. I'll have to find an engineer. So it's really hard to portray these concepts to money people. And in order to build a bigger prototype, we're going to need some money.
Yeah. So that's where I was are we getting to the point now where you need to start raising some money?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Well, hold on. After this prototype got trashed, like, did you make another one or were you just like,
Well,
no.
Yeah.
No.
Shortly after
We
this was
realized the
back to
limit
the
of our
drawing
abilities.
table. Yeah. Back to the drawing table.
all right. And now
But
you're like, we need money.
It did show me too that the system I was trying at that point wasn't going to work. Like I realized that the temperature losses across so many steps were going to keep it from working. So it was a good learning experience in the end, fiery learning experience, but a good one.
Yeah.
Literal
So
trial by fire.
I had to go back to the drawing board at that point. So we spent a few months where I was just back in my computer trying to rework all the different systems and trying to get things to something that was going to be more feasible. And I think maybe it was around, no, it wasn't at that point yet. So David moved away because our project had ended and he worked for different districts. So he moved back to Houston and I was kind of just working on the side and eventually ran into a thing with that company where I was like, okay, I have to leave this job at this point. So might as well go full time on this stuff and get it rolling.
Yeah.
So I called Dave. I was like, hey, I'm quitting. And he was like, cool, you want to just come move here with me and we'll figure it out? And I was like, cool. So I lived in Dave's closet.
Yeah, I had a 800 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment with like a abnormally large storage closet.
That was your room?
in no way a room.
Big closet.
It was a big closet, but a small room.
Nice.
It's just funny. He just threw his mattress topper down on the floor and just slept on that for 3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months.
That's some
before we moved to
entrepreneur
Denver.
shit, dude.
Yeah. And that's where I was at, man. There was a moment that I feel like I should hit way back when I was still in college. I went and talked to a friend of mine who was a CEO for a startup company. My cousin worked for him. I knew him quite a bit because my brother and him hung out. So I just said hey man, I just need some advice. Let's talk about what it takes to do what you're doing. And to sum up what he told me that day was, look, you've got to just drop everything else.
That makes sense. Like if you really want to have a solid go at this, man, drop everything and just go for it.
Everyone's working 40 hours a week. You got to do 80.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to make it. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker. I was like, he's so right. That's exactly what I do. And I did. I shut off a whole lot of my friends group. I stopped going out with people and I just turned and focused. And that was before I even went to Kiewit. So then I was working 12 hours a day there and trying to do that same thing here. I mean, I definitely took some time and had some bar nights and things
like that. You still had somewhat of a life.
Yeah. But it was like a complete adjustment to the only thing that matters is this work. And so I kind of forget where we're at. Oh, so moving in with Dave into his closet, that was obvious to me. It was like, I'm going to be able to work all day on this stuff. And I don't have to have another job.
And at that point, you're so amped and zoned in on your idea that you could probably hardly think about anything else.
Yeah. And I told Dave that all the time. He was like, hey man, let's go out. And I'm like, if we go out, I'm just going to be sitting there thinking about thermodynamics and I'm not going to be able to have conversations. I just need to do this thing. So I did that for a while. And then Dave moved off to Denver. He got a job with another construction company there. So he moved that way, but I stayed in Houston. And at that point, I'd started networking a little bit in the Houston, entrepreneurial network. All kinds of networking events where money people were.
Yeah.
And so
here we got Capital Factory downtown Austin,
it's
whatever
very
the
similar to
equivalent would be over there. Start getting into that network.
And the reason I stayed in Houston, because there are great entrepreneurial networks in almost all cities now, but Houston's is very energy related. Like Austin's is probably more tech side.
For sure. In Houston, I feel like is all oil and gas and energy, and Austin's like the new Silicon Valley.
And at this time, I'm still thinking power plants, only power plants, and maybe oil and gas stuff at the same time, but predominantly power plants because they're really the problem. So working there for a little while by myself, and eventually we found this company in Illinois.
Illinois.
It's a bearing company that has these massive furnaces, and they have this cooling problem. And I don't have any clue.
All year long, they're heating parts of their plant that they're also blowing air conditioning into. I mean, their plant is a thermodynamic nightmare.
It is a nightmare. It really is.
It is insane. And when we're talking about the differences in heat, they're trying to blow 60-degree air on their workers who are standing in front of a 1,000-degree furnace.
Close to it. Yeah. We definitely took some readings around 600-700 degrees.
It's just insane inefficiencies all over the place. So that's kind of why they called us. I
think like the thing that I should say about Houston is two things were happening. I was networking there a whole lot, and I was driving back and forth to Corpus, where I had, I guess, a colleague who I'd worked with at Kiewit. She was doing some consulting for Kiewit at the time, where we met. We were working on some of the higher level projects together when I left. And she owns her own consulting business, and it's a business consulting firm. So she obviously knows some things. So I'm just kind of tossing out my business plans to her, and she's marking them up. And man, I kept one of those business plans for a while because I was projecting like I'll be making $1 billion in 3 years, and she was like, "Shut up! Like, don't show anyone that.
Don't show anyone that.
This is really dumb.
She'll let Jeff Bezos.
But man, that's where I was back then. I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna make it. It's all gonna work great. Well, she kind of helped me zone in on like, okay, let's get some realistic projections about what might happen. So I'm networking, and I found this network group there who's got some interest in the energy side of things. And I've got who will be my future CEO. I didn't realize at the time that that's what she was going to be doing. But
this woman that was helping you,
the business consultant,
get a little more concrete on your business plan,
Yeah. And so I met at one of those networking events. I met a girl whose dad worked at a bearing company in Illinois, and she said, "My dad said something about they're having problems with cooling. I'll give him your number." I was like, cool, that's great. So he calls me and he's like, "Can you come out here? Let's talk about it." So I went out to Illinois, talked to the guy for a little while. And by this point I had established a few technical advisors who had met, through my internships and my professional life, people like supervisors from my power plant time, construction, clients really, from my Kiewit days, who all kind of knew enough about the tech and the business to help me make better decisions. And so after going out to that bearing company in Illinois, I said, "What do you guys think? What's our next step? How do we make this happen?" And they all said, "Well, how do we make a prototype that's, feasible?"
Well, first you got to set your garage on fire.
Right. Yeah. That is step number one.
They love that story, by the way. They thought that was one of the funniest things they'd heard. Most of our investors loved that.
So that was probably the biggest chunk of change that I got to kind of get rolling, was that board of advisors said, "How much do you need?" I think at the time it was about 40,000 or something to build something small scale.
That's what you decided you needed for the prototype.
Right.
And this
is still like tabletop level prototype, very small. And it wasn't going to have the rotating machinery. It was just going to be proving a specific part of the process that people are having a hard time understanding.
And so how are you going to, did you have to consult people on how to build this prototype? How did you price it even? I mean, where did you get 40 grand?
I came out of the construction industry.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what I was going to buy, what it was going to look like. I mean, I designed it all the way from the bottom up.
Okay.
Just building a bill of materials, finding the materials locally, and developed an estimate.
So just with your own expertise, you were able to somewhat accurately, or did it end up being pretty accurate as to...
Yeah, actually, I think we came a few $1,000s under budget there for that one.
Nice.
But remember, none of us are getting paid at this point. So
probably over you raised money. You still are not getting paid for anything. I mean, you raised money to build the prototype.
I had a few family and friends investors who had given me, $5,000, $10,000 here or there.
Some stuff here and there.
And I was taking out of that as I had to. Like I had to pay rent. So I'd pull out of that just to pay that thing or whatever, just trying to keep my bills as cheap as possible so that I could continue to work on this stuff.
And of course, this is right around the time when I came and joined the business full time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when I joined the business, I was leaving a pretty decently paying job
Mm-hmm.
to come and make $1,000 a month, just because that's what I needed to cover vehicle payments, insurance, things like that. So
Yeah, I was just
it
thinking
was a really rough go of it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we were living on nothing for a while. I think you were living on $1,000 a month.
$1,000 a month, and
But
then
this is after the bearing company and after that prototype.
during it.
Well, after we went and showed it to him, and then we had that meeting
that's right.
in Macomb, Illinois,
yeah.
and we said, "All right, it's time to go full time." So that's when we brought you and Chase and Mike, and that's when I found out Dariah, the business consultant that I met at Kiewit.
Mm-hmm. At what point did you actually draw up papers and make a LLC? Did you make an LLC?
I started that in 2014.
Oh, so you made was it an LLC or
it was an LLC?
Okay, yeah. Autry Industrial.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I wrote my own investor agreements and everything just because I could not find a way to pay a lawyer. It just seemed ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
And they turned out to be decent documents in the end that had some missing components. And later we updated all of our investor documents to a more professional format than we had before.
Well, perfect. I mean, that's another thing I've read a lot into, like, people, if they're going to start a business, it's like, well, what kind of entity do I need? How thorough does this need to be?
Yeah.
And from what I found, it's like, it's pretty easy to make an LLC, but if you start to get more money and things get more complicated, you can revise that stuff. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Once you get some money, then you can go to a lawyer and say, how do I make sure this is airtight? Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, and until there's money involved, it doesn't matter that much,
Yeah.
So, I'm going to take quick break. You mind checking my angle since I got update? Still on? We're still recording? Oh shit, that one's not recording?
Like this whole time?
Oh shit. Oh, good to check then. It won't be that big of a deal since I don't talk much, but yeah, let's figure that out.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I'm just thinking we're like a quarter of the way through the story. Yeah, we should probably jump forward. I mean, but that's the thing, man. There's so many things that happen. This is such a roller coaster of a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're only a quarter of the way through the story.
Yeah, we should probably speed up a little bit.
I'll check yours if you want.
Do it and make sure it's on record. Okay. I did put a new card in that one, right? Yeah, I switched it. God damn it.
Good thing we checked, huh?
Yeah, good thing we checked, man. And see, I want to get this little board that shows me a screen of all cameras at all times.
Yeah.
And allows you to switch the cameras, which I can't be switching the cameras and do the podcast. It's too distracting, but I'd at least like to see that they're all recording.
That'd
be more comfortable. Because sometimes you guys are talking and I'm sitting here like, are the cameras recording? And I'm not listening to what you're saying because I'm worried about the fucking cameras.
Because you're thinking about all the technical details.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, I'll figure it out. But
yeah, this is just like the part where you're getting used to doing the podcast. You start to get your methods down.
For sure. But I think that I do need to make that investment, especially now that happened. Like, I am going to go ahead and just buy that and set it up. In that way I can be comfortable and know that everything's working.
Yeah,
and
that way we can stay in the podcast and not have to think about all the technical stuff.
And I've had a couple of people offer to help and actually run that system. Yeah. Where were we though?
So we're at the point where we've built another prototype for a bearing company in Illinois.
Just a small desktop prototype.
They had given us enough
small investment amount.
Yeah. So I'd gotten about $40,000 for my board to build this prototype. Meanwhile, a few friends and family, shout out to Candace McGovern, who gave me the first $4,000 and kind of kickstarted everything.
Yeah.
Nice.
She's amazing.
Yeah. She's one of the greatest people I've ever met too. But we were saying here on the break that we should probably speed this up a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to be like a 9-hour podcast.
Yeah.
So we went and had a pretty good meeting at the bearing company. And they seemed interested enough that our board said, we think you should probably kick it up into a higher gear. So we hired Dave on, we hired my brother on, we hired one of our buddies, Mike, and Dariah Rogers, the business consultant I met at Kiewit, said, hey, I'd kind of like to phase out of consulting and just become your CEO. And so, of course, I was like, that sounds amazing, because her advice up to this point has been incredible.
She sounds like a very competent person.
Yeah, and she knows everyone, and she can get to any company at the C level. So it seemed like, yep, for sure, definitely going to do this. And to this day, I still work for her now in her consulting company now that we've kind of spun out of Autry stuff. So we had that idea, or that company that we had some positive feedback from. So we got all the guys down together in Beaumont, Texas. If you get a chance to visit it, just skip it. And we worked for a little while there, still trying to push in towards the power plant side. And we got to a point where we realized these power plants get such cheap money because they don't take risks. So they get very, very low interest rates to build power plants because they're not risky at all. We've been doing power plants for a while. We kind of know how they work. They're very adverse to new tech. And we kind of realized how entrenched they are in that thought as we started trying to push these people. Because they're like, wow, it sounds amazing. I love, what a great increase in efficiency. Sounds awesome. No way. Get out.
Yeah, show me when it's worked for 20 years.
Yeah, do you have one working in a plant right now? Like, no, we wanted you to be that guy. And they're like, okay, bye.
No one wants to be first.
And so we kind of hit a point there where we thought, man, we really need to evaluate whether or not this is going to work. And so due just to the simple scientific nature of the product we were trying to produce, we realized that the backside of a steam turbine runs about the same temperature as a CPU, as a GPU. So we can take that same temperature and do things with those same things in the data center world.
Okay, so you're like, these power plant people are tough customers. This would be really great, but if you can't convince them to buy it, then you don't have a business. So how can we translate this into another style of business? And data centers are blowing up.
And data centers are a little bit more open to newer ideas, newer tech. And
they're always trying new stuff. The investments
are blowing up. They're always trying to find some new thing that'll work better than the other guy to be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of pushed into that world, and then we started just kind of throwing out feelers. My CEO was able to get us a conversation with the R&D team at Google within like the first week. We said, this might be an idea. She got us in some conversations with Microsoft probably a few weeks after that. And we just started saying, hey, here's what we're trying to talk about doing. Here's what we're thinking. And so Microsoft was probably the best potential client that we had. They were the most interested. Google was kind of looking at it from a standpoint of, we're not really sure that is going to fit into the bigger program.
Mm-hmm.
But Microsoft has taken quite a few big leaps to try something different and new. For instance, they had this program called the Nautic program, where they dropped a data center in the ocean and they just used the ocean to cool it.
Oh, that's
which
badass.
Is pretty neat.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. They spent about, I think if my numbers are right, about $7 million just building a prototype and seeing what it would do. Saltwater is really corrosive, and I don't think that really panned out, but they went into it thinking like, this is a learning experience. We're just trying to figure out new things.
They're willing to try stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of where they were at with us, was show me that you can do this part, this section of prove to me that this works thermodynamically. Don't worry about how it interfaces with the servers.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So with a vote of confidence from Microsoft, an informal vote of confidence, we were able to establish a joint venture partnership with this company in St. Louis. And the relationship started out fantastic. They seemed very down-to-earth people, like almost like a mom and pop shop that got really big.
Mm-hmm.
They had about 300 engineers, and they specifically built boilers for power plants, but
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to branch out into new things. And so they have the thermodynamic experts. And so that was kind of the first time we really got someone who actually could understand what we were doing to review it and say like, yeah, this thing's going to work.
Yeah, which allowed us, gained us clout. We had the backing of this 100-year-old company saying, we vetted it and that we think the system works.
Yeah,
and they are unquestionably thermodynamic experts.
Yeah.
They've been doing this for a minute. Like
Nice.
They know what they're up to. So our CEO was able to negotiate an exclusivity fee where the company wouldn't, they would pay us a fee so that we wouldn't go talk to anybody else for that exact same partnership. And man, we were down to about $1,000 in the bank account. Like we were out of money.
Garret and I had sat down, I think, a few days beforehand, and we're like, do we give the money to turn on the lights?
Yeah, do we pay the
Do
power
we
bill?
give the money? Yeah, do we pay the power? Do we pay for more materials so we can work on the prototype more? Do we
buy
pay
groceries?
ourselves? Yeah, so we can eat and not lose our vehicles or our house or anything, So it's like, what do we do? And it just came right at the nick of time.
So in the spirit of speeding this up a little bit, that check, it was a $200,000 exclusivity fee, came in the week we weren't going to be able to pay everybody their very tiny salaries that we were paying them at that point. So it was like, whoa, a big breath of fresh air. Finally, we've got something moving.
And that was the most money you'd ever received?
Yeah.
At that point,
At least in a
yeah.
single lump, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and it was non-refundable. It was just to not talk to anybody else. So this was just like breathing room.
Yeah, exclusivity kind of explains itself, but so it's like, we'll fund you on this and work with you on this if you solely work with us. That's what it is?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't talk to anybody else.
Okay, don't tell anybody about this tech, nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we moved through that, and the relationship was great for a long time. We formed a joint venture partnership, which basically determines who has what types of ownerships, and it goes down a list of things like, if this goes wrong, then this is what happens. The IP belongs to these people, this IP belongs to these people, and just kind of establishes that full relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's the cover your ass contract.
Yeah, and the president of the company at the time, man, he was great. He was on our side. He was helping us find new avenues, new opportunities, pushing us to work harder, which no one else had ever done, because we always thought of ourselves as like the hardest workers we've ever met. And he was pushing us to do better, which was a great relationship. And then luckily, this is why I think anybody who's looking into entrepreneurship whatsoever at least needs a board of advisors who have this kind of mindset. My CEO she started her own businesses. She's been advising Fortune 500 companies. She has a really good experience to understand what might go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So in those joint venture documents, she had established what happens if there's a regime change, what happens if the money runs out of this coffer or that coffer. And luckily she had done all of that due diligence and said, like, what's going to happen in all these possible scenarios, because they fired their president and they moved
in the midst of our project, in the midst of us building this
joint venture
prototype.
company.
Yeah.
Mm.
So the company in St. Louis, they fired their president and moved in a new president out of Italy who was the biggest fucking asshole I had ever met in my life.
Racist, sexist,
sucked.
homophobic,
geez.
I mean, if you can name the negative trait, he had it.
Everyone in that company hated him.
Mm.
But he was on the board of the holding company that was over the company that was formed the joint venture with us.
Mm.
And when he moved in, everything changed. We had, we'd started some talks with Black & Veatch, which is a really big construction firm. They wanted to move into the data center world, and they saw our product as an opportunity to kind of get some competitive edge and show the data center companies that they've got what they were doing, and they got something different. So they were looking at about a $5 million investment in the joint venture, not in my company, but in the joint venture itself. So they'd be like the third party in this joint venture, and they were excited about it. When they left the prototype that we had built, they were stoked. They were going back to be like, we got to get with the investment group and just get this thing like lined out. Well,
at that point, you're probably really excited. Things are getting really exciting.
And
right
it
now.
was like finally all of our hard work is paying off. We had spent months or years designing this, and then the last 8 months before this meeting, spending 24 hours a day literally on site building it.
Yeah, and you're getting some serious validation.
Yeah.
I mean, $200,000 is a lot of money. And then,
oh yeah, and I should say by the point we were talking to Black & Veatch, we had probably raised a total of about $3 million.
Okay.
Something
So
like
once
that.
you got to
Yeah.
that, now,
We've accelerated forward. Most of that investment
Because
came from
the joint venture partnership.
joint venture partnership and some high level investment like firms.
Yeah.
So you were actually able to pay like your CEO a salary.
Yeah, and
you could-
us too.
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
too.
finally.
And we were making enough money to actually get by,
Mhm. Yeah.
instead of like scraping every
Yeah,
single
so
penny.
you could pay the bills. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so once we'd had this like opportunity with Black & Veatch, they left the prototype that we had built and were excited about it. This new president who they had signed over the company flew to Kansas City and went and talked to their investment team and told them not to invest, which makes no sense. He's a 50% owner in this joint venture. We showed them all of our data. They knew everything that we were doing. His thermodynamic experts had vetted this fully. I mean, they were working with us to build it.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided he hated us from day one.
Yeah, we were the old.
We were the pet
president's
project of
pet
the
project.
old president. And so his goal day one was to get rid of us.
Oh, he's got to like come in
vendetta.
and he's the new guy and like
Swing his dick
So
around.
the old guy was working with us and helping us and finding opportunities, and the new guy was thwarting everything we did.
Damn, dude.
And
That's
from that
tough.
point on, it was just, I think it was just too much. Like we don't have the energy to push against the world and this guy who's supposed to be on our side.
This is already hard enough.
Yeah.
Like your own partner should not be fighting against you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow, man. I hate it comes down to one person being a dick.
Yeah.
It really
was.
Really
he
did.
just
It
hated
really
us. He just wanted to be an asshole.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's because you're gay?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's fucked up.
It's one of the first
dude.
things he told me.
Dude, he told you
Well, no,
that?
he didn't say it to me because on the business world, I hide that completely.
Yeah.
I don't let them
You feel
know
like
that
you're
at all.
obligated to.
Yeah, he
people's
just went
judgment.
down stories about, I can remember him telling this one story at dinner. And like, he's got this glass of wine in his hand and he's got like a bread thing in the other. And he's telling this story about a gay beach that he said his daughter took him to. And he was like, I would have rather drown in the water than be on the beach with gay people. I'm like, whoa, this guy is like next
Intense.
level hate.
Dude, saying that out loud.
Yeah, at a business dinner too.
At a fucking business
just
dinner?
keep your
With
opinions to yourself.
Probably 13 or 14 other people around the table.
Did he know that you were gay at this point?
No,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
none of them ever did.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
maybe they thought.
Yeah.
but,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was not open about it. I wasn't even out at that
And then
point.
especially after you hear that, you're like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, fuck this guy. But two, I should mention that my CEO, being a woman, he wouldn't even look at her.
oh my God.
She would say,
dude.
like, she would ask a question and he would turn to me and answer it.
Wow, that's so fucking.
He was next level asshole.
Dude,
Yeah.
I hate this guy.
Yeah, this guy
I
sucks.
fucking hate this guy.
Yeah. He was one of the worst humans I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dude, and you bust your ass off. You have this fucking great idea to save all this money and resources
And a working prototype.
it could literally change. I want to say it could change the world, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought that at one point. I think now that I've been out of it a little bit, I've had some conversations with some industry experts that I didn't have the chance to talk to before.
Mhm.
And I've realized that it was a little bit too disruptive
Mm-hmm.
in that there's kind of this path set with like the form factors of servers, like what kind of equipment they use, the capacities of everything. It's almost like one of the guys explained it to me in a way. The road is the width that it is because it's the width of two horses.
Mm-hmm.
And that was established back in Roman times.
Mm-hmm.
The data center world has already decided what the width of the road is. And you're
Mhm.
trying to increase the width of the road.
Mhm.
You know how much money that would cost to
I
increase
see.
all the roads.
So there are other variables that come into play to implement this tech.
Which we understood,
Mhm.
right? Like we knew that there were going to be different kinds of heat sinks. We're going to
Mhm.
work at higher pressures than anyone normally works at. We're going to have more tubing.
It's like, but we're gonna have problems. We'll solve them. You know,
Mhm.
it's like
And we at least thought at the
Nothing
time,
was insurmountable.
mhm.
it
nothing.
seemed to us that Microsoft had said, don't worry about that. We're going to have to work together on how that works.
And I like that approach. I mean, I like that approach with software development, everything else. It's like worry about this first.
Mhm.
Just do this, and then we'll figure out if we can fit it into these other pieces of the puzzle. Because if you try to take everything into consideration at once,
Yeah.
you're just going nowhere.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we still had the Microsoft thing going once this president started being a complete dick. But it was January 9th, 2019, that the main contact we had at Microsoft they'd brought in a new mechanical consultant who was convinced that all we were doing was refrigeration, which super fucking not. It literally goes in the opposite direction of that. Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't make any sense. But he couldn't get off of that whatsoever. So he'd kind of convinced them that our tech wasn't feasible, whether he was right or wrong, and they lost interest. And
Mhm.
so at that point, Microsoft has lost interest. We were still having some conversations with Google, but they were slow. And our joint venture partner had become this massive problem. I mean, it got to the point where we were trying to talk them down out of litigation every week.
My
It's
God,
like, this is not even worth it anymore.
fuck this
doesn't
guy.
even
Is he
make
still the
any
president of that company?
Yeah, he's a total douchebag. His name is Piero, and I hope somebody hears this podcast. I was like, wow, he's a
Yeah.
douche. Because that's a bridge I'm willing to burn. He's the worst
Exactly.
person who ever lived.
Tell
Easily.
Piero wholeheartedly from the Autry Industrial team that we hope he gets a swift kick to the
Yeah,
nuts.
go fuck yourself, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, a woman,
Whatever we can do.
an extremely competent woman. All this stuff you said about her, I mean, she sounds like such a professional, such a smart lady. For her to sit there and just have a conversation looking at someone's
Dude,
face
the composure she had to have.
and then him look at someone else to answer, my God.
Because I was ready to flip the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she's explaining to me that she's just used to it. She works in the construction world, so she sees a whole lot of men who don't think women have a say.
The construction world's probably bad in it. I mean, still, that's a pretty high level of.
And all women have to deal with this to an extent, at least. But her specifically, she's had a lot of those kind of things happen. So she's had practice.
She's dealing with C-level people in industries where people are old school.
Though I think she would probably agree that Piero was the worst asshole I ever run into. No?
No.
There's one other.
Bill Wisman.
Oh,
I think he's in jail now, though.
I think he is.
He's in jail now, though.
Dude, that's a whole nother story.
Oh, my God. The story of Bill Wisman is extraordinary.
He was
it is amazing.
He was the technical expert for this investor we were looking at in California.
It's like, this is very early on. Like when we had just all joined the company, we were just trying to get our initial, like getting past our family friends funding.
Yeah, we're trying to get a little bit more
Trying to
money.
get like
maybe a
bigger money.
He was talking about a few $100,000 investment.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to his technical expert, who apparently created carbon filters.
Even though he didn't look like a 3,000-year-old Egyptian to me.
Yeah, I mean, he claimed all kinds of things. He invented all these things in the oil field, which, no. He claimed that he invented some pill while he was living in Russia that would keep him from getting drunk.
Yeah, so not only did he invented it while invented and developed and used it.
Yeah.
All while living in Russia.
Where you can't even really get potatoes.
I'm sorry,
off the shelf.
but if you were that good at
why would you take a pill and then drink
pharmaceuticals? You would have a job at Monsanto for a bajillion dollars a year.
Yeah. For sure.
You're a chemist expert. Like,
not to mention,
he had stories, man. And he had this investor convinced because he was pretty well invested in the company that guy worked for that guy owned.
He's one of these guys that's just insane, and he happened to hook somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was an epic con man.
Yeah,
he really was.
Yeah.
We go to meet with this guy.
It's like Firefest level shit, only higher maybe.
Yes. And we go to meet with this guy, right, where he's supposed to learn about our technology and determine whether it's good or not and whatnot. And he spent the entire, 2.5 hour meeting, it ended up being roughly, talking about himself.
Yeah,
he didn't even ask us
we
questions.
looked at the college that he said he went to, and it doesn't even exist.
Oh my God!
Yeah. It was bizarro.
He had his degree in science.
His one
that's as broad as it gets, isn't it?
Right, yeah. I have a PhD. I have a PhD in chemistry. No, you don't.
Yeah,
you don't get a PhD in chemistry. You have to get more specific than that. But his one item of advice he gave us was that we needed something more sexy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He's like, you need to like put it in a covalent field or something. I'm like, what the fuck are you even talking about?
It's a magnetic field of like influence.
It's not even a real thing.
And that just showed you how
he just said like, you should just say that because then people will invest in you. Like, directly told us. I'm like, dude.
Well, in his life experience, he just talks a whole bunch of shit and then he hooks somebody and he's like, dude, just lie and manipulate your way to success is what he's trying to tell you.
Just pretend you're smarter than other people and they'll believe you.
Yeah.
Like, we all looked at each other like, shit, what the fuck do we do? And we were just like,
talking about having composure, trying to keep your shit together in a meeting like that.
Laugh at him in the face.
Yeah.
Like, because we didn't want to piss off this potential investor. But later we finally realized, like, look, we got to we're not getting this money from this guy, but we have to tell him because he's one of our CEO's friends. We just have to tell him he's getting screwed hard. He's getting screwed.
This guy's an absolute fraudster.
Yeah. And I mean, he was already under like 2 lawsuits and criminal charges like a couple weeks after we met him. So like, he's going down for sure.
Yeah.
But man, there were some bizarro things that happened.
And this is just, these are some of the things that happen as a young young entrepreneur seeking investment. You're going to meet characters like this on a regular basis. Don't trust
everyone either.
Yeah.
Because they're probably mostly
and
idiots.
just because they're older doesn't mean that they're smarter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was a big lesson.
For sure. I feel like that's something I've noticed as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
I used to just think everyone older than me was smarter than me. And I was like, I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not it. Definitely not it.
Or honest, you know what I mean, necessarily. So don't assume that they know what they're saying just because they think they do.
Yeah.
Where the fuck were we, dude? No clue.
I mean, I was just going to hit the point of like doing some lessons learned. I think we
were bitching about Piero, then we talked about Bill Wisman, and then that's kind of where we broke.
Yeah, I mean, we got to the point where we're saying
interesting people.
Back in January 2019, we lost interest from Microsoft. Our joint venture partner is actively working against us now. So everything, we kind of started flailing at that point, and we really didn't make it past September 2019. It's when we stopped paying salaries. We tried to use our expertise from building that huge prototype into robotics, which is very similar. And we had a good time doing it. We thought like, oh, we've got this great market moving forward. And turns out that was just kind of like a floundering thing. We should have probably just wrapped things up earlier, but we wanted to make something out of it.
It's hard to, you spend all this time. It's hard to just,
you can't just call it quits just like that. It's too hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I really just wanted to give some insights to people who might be looking at entrepreneurship and throw out some things about how, like, what you're going to run into and some lessons I learned from the whole situation. Like, I mean, we've got the funny ones that are like, you're going to run into characters like Bill Wisman who just
freaking Bill, man,
blow your mind. But I mean, I think I would tell people the same thing that CEO told me in my early days. It's like, you've got to put the other shit down and just focus on this if you want to be successful. And that doesn't stop. And that's what people need to realize, is that there's not going to come, I mean, maybe 10 years down the road when you're trying to do high tech things, at least. I always focused on ideas and concepts that were going to be big, but ultimately they were risky for that exact same reason. And now I look at entrepreneurship as something that's smaller, but slow growing, something more stable, rather than trying for these moonshots that we were trying to do. I mean, I probably got a lot of lessons just to chat about. You got anything, Dave? You want to?
I mean, it's a ton of hard work. It's rewarding. It's
a roller coaster.
It is a roller coaster. You've got to be emotionally and mentally resilient in every way. And you've got to pay a lot of attention to your mental health throughout those things, as I learned the hard way, I
want to say, it seems like I'm talking to you on, how many years ago is this? 2019 is when it wound down?
Yeah. That was the point we started like really turning.
You seem very like collected, not freaked out. It's like,
oh, dude, I went through a massive depression.
Did you?
Last year.
Yeah.
I always knew it was coming too. Like, I always told myself, like 99% of startups fail. You're probably going to fail. Failing's okay. But it's one thing to say that and to really
it's easy to say that.
Because you feel like I went through waves of, I feel like a fraud, that I duped all these people, when in no way did I ever. I went through waves of thinking like the cops are going to show up at my door, but I never did anything illegal. Just was, it was my everything for years.
Yeah. Like, you're attaching your,
you pour your heart,
your identity
your
and your self-worth to it.
Exactly.
It's such a big thing.
I pushed off romantic relationships. I pushed away friendships. My parents and my relationship suffered because they would call and be like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm working. What do you need?
Yeah, like
everything turned into that. Everything about my life was about work. And it took losing that company to realize like, whoa, shit, it's not all about that. I do need to think about other things.
So how do you feel now? Like, I don't feel like you would have damaged your career too much. I mean, if anything, you have some great experience that some other people don't have. I mean, like, let's say you stayed in the workforce instead of trying to do your own thing, and like you could have built yourself up higher into a company. Does any of that stuff concern you? Do you have any regrets about that?
About not climbing the corporate ladder?
Yeah.
It was, I mean,
I wouldn't regret not climbing the corporate ladder, dude.
I can't regret it because it was never an option.
Same.
From as far back as I can remember, I was going to start a company. I was just working corporate jobs until I was ready.
Until you had the financing and the expertise to know when it's time. Like, I've got this thing.
And not to mention that the experience that we gained through this, launching into our own company, and the exposure of the high level of CEO and large company that we got exposed to would have never happened if we were staying in the traditional floor. We would have been 20 years away from something like with these conversations that we got to have at 5 years. So.
You always would have been also, if you didn't go through with this and give it your all like you did, you'd have constantly been like, oh, that could have I should have. Your whole life,
what
you would have felt
that
been?
way.
I before I actually went full time and like took the actual plunge, I met this guy in a bar, and he asked me what I did, and I told him, I was working for this construction company. He's like, "Is that what you want to do for the rest of your life, or what are you thinking?" And I was like, "No, I want to start a company." So he went down and was like, "Oh, I tried to do that once, or I was gonna at least." I was like, "Well, why didn't you? Like, what happened?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I just never really took the leap." And I was like, so how do you feel about that? And he was like, oh, I would have done great. I would have been awesome. But you know, I guess now I'm just here. And I thought, man, I can't ever be that guy who 20 years down the road, like I had an idea, but you know, I didn't fucking do anything with it.
Totally agree.
Depressing and sad. So I had to just try it,
Yeah.
you know? And now that I have, I think the corporate ladder is a little bit more attractive than it used to be. Just from the stability and the lack of risk.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's just like, it seems like you're the same way as me. Clearly you are. I mean, even more all in than me. Like I've always like, I don't want to take a cookie cutter approach to life. Like that just doesn't entertain me. I know I won't be happy, you know, like I can do it for a while, but it's a means to an end, you know? I mean, it's all just to build skills for me to do something myself and run my own show and all that stuff, you know, like just direct my entire life, complete freedom, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like while I've had some dark times, I honestly feel like up until, you know, things started to kind of turn for the worse, I lived life at full volume. Like I would wake up in the morning and force myself out of bed and like get moving. And I would work until I just couldn't anymore. And it was great. My dad had to remind me of that as I was kind of, you know, sinking into depression. He was like, you remember times when I would call you and ask you about how busy you were and what all you're doing. You'd always tell me there's nothing else in the world you'd rather be doing. Even though you were miserably tired and exhausted from everything. You were always happy.
Yeah, it's not as if you were wasting your time. He's saying, remember that like you didn't hate doing this.
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
you were entertained.
Yeah, because in the end, it felt like it was all for nothing. But really, during the whole time doing it, I couldn't have been doing anything else. It was the only thing that mattered, and it was worth it for that standpoint. You know
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people always ask like, if you could go back, what would you do? Would you do it differently? I'm like, well, I can't, obviously.
Yeah.
But
I think
I would still do it again.
I would have never made a different choice.
I would do things differently if I knew what was coming.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, like I could have made better choices along the way.
And maybe got different investors. And really probably all boiled down to if you had the right investor.
Yeah.
Something could have came of it.
And that's what people need to know.
And even the right joint venture partner is what really I think it came down to for us.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, going into it, they seem like the perfect fit.
You're just excited to get the money because
and we finally got some traction in this world finally, but
some breathing.
But in the
room.
end, it turned negative. Thank God we had a CEO who knew how to prepare for that. I mean, she had the president, you know, the one that got fired. 3 weeks before he got fired, we went to him and told him, look, you're getting fired. We can see this coming. He's going to move into your position. We need you to sign this. And he did, because he was like, oh shit, you're totally right. And he signed a revision to the agreement that gave us more control so that the new president couldn't come in and just squash everything. That we had more power in that scenario. Without somebody like that who knows what's happening and just that kind of foresight, it's going to be tough to get through.
Yeah, for sure. Seems like she was a super good resource.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got us eons further than we ever could have gotten on our own.
So, I mean, what now? I mean, you've gone through this roller coaster ride. I can't imagine. Man, you just said the corporate ladder looks more attractive, but like, do you think that you still got a round two in you?
Yeah, you know, I think I'm open to typical corporate jobs at this point.
But you're still kind of recovering from, I mean, you need to get yourself back together after all that.
Yeah, no joke. And right now doing consulting is enjoyable. I mean, it's flexible hours. It's challenging work where like the thing that I love most is solving problems. And in consulting, typically people are saying, I don't have a fucking clue how to do this. Can you help? And we say yes, because any problem that you put in front of us,
someone's camera
just another camera's gone. But any problem that we run into, we can solve it. And that's what's fun about consulting to me, that it's always some problem other people can't solve and I get a chance to try it. So I'm finding a lot of joy in that.
Yeah.
Cool. At least for the time being, as long as projects work out.
Yeah. So one of our cameras shut off, so you know, and we're at over an hour.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to talk about?
No, I think that's a pretty good show.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy story. I loved having you guys on.
Yeah.
And I've liked hanging out and meeting y'all in the past year. It's been fun.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't jump around too much, but hopefully the story made some sense to the listeners.
I'm sure it did. And I want to say thanks to everybody that subscribed on YouTube and my friends that text me and said, they really enjoyed the show. It does mean a lot. It is a lot of effort, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So just hearing some good things from my friends means a lot to me. And share it. Anything you can do, like it, share
subscribe
it on anything.
Stuff.
Highly appreciate.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Justin. We really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was a good time.
It's great.
Happy to come back.
Cool. See ya.
All right, bye.
Bye.